Okay, hello and welcome everyone to the final virtual lecture at the study season 2024. It's the lecture in track 4, reputation-based weighted voting, the A to Z token engineering case study. We have been working since April on reputation-based weighted voting. It has been an amazing journey, and this final session is to share our learnings and to discuss the final steps we have to take to launch the voting on June 25th. Before we do that, you can still get access in case you're following us via Twitter or YouTube. You can still get access to the full learning materials, the recordings of our sessions via tokenengineering.net. Just register for the study season. It's not closed. You can still do that and then get access to all the materials created in this track and all other tracks, in total 8. And in case you have taken enrolled in any of our online courses, you can now mint NFTs without any fees. Again, tokenengineering.net, all our courses are available there. Find the learning material and the online exams there, and then you can mint NFTs as a proof of knowledge. Again, free minting open from June 6th to July 9th. And with that, I'd like to say hello to everyone in the Zoom call. Hello, guys. Great to see you again in this final session. Hello, Octopus. Hello, GM. And yeah, this session is about sharing your learning journey and receive your NFTs, of course. So first of all, congratulations to all who submitted their points tracker. There was nothing to, let's say, to criticize here. We were super happy to see your submissions. We have seen awesome tiny little steps in contributing to the requirements, up to fully fledged simulations and voting designs. So thank you so much. This is a list of people who submitted and are eligible to receive an NFT. I'll send a message to the Discord just in case someone is not able to attend this session. Otherwise, we'll contact you in the next days with a separate email to explain the process, or maybe just confirm that we have distributed the NFT. Most important step that you have to take on your side is that you connect a wallet address for receiving the NFTs to your TE Academy account. And if you haven't, please do so. You can find all information how to make that work on the Notion Study Season Information Hub. And yeah, just keep in mind, select the wallet carefully. Don't lose the private keys because the NFTs are non-transferable. And if you lose access, you'll lose control over your NFTs. Okay. Now, we have a lot to share, actually, Octopus. You and I have been working over the week on several variants, how to fine-tune the weights and further explore dictatorship resistance, Sybil resistance with the voting designs and particularly the weight settings. But first and foremost, this session is about what you'd like to share and your learning journey. And we have a number of people who signed up for providing a presentation. This is Watcher, Aaron, Felix, and Jade, One Love, Victor, and us, if there's time, Octopus and me. And yeah, I think I first hand over to Octopus because you have put together some questions you'd like to ask.
Yeah, it's always interesting for me because in this type of class compared to a traditional university class, there's such a wide array of backgrounds. In a traditional university class teaching calculus, you can pretty much be sure that no one who enters the class knows calculus. But in this class, there are people who are coming in who are already strong developers or already strong data scientists. And I'm curious what steps you took that were new and what specific skills you learned And then I think the second thing to discuss is like more generally what you have learned that it's more high level. But first, I want to ask: did anybody write their first line of Python code during this experience?
Raise your hand, switch on your mic, whatever.
With your help.
Awesome.
Really,
Thanks.
Aaron? Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, believe it or not, I
Amazing.
had
Yeah.
a software company and I had 30 developers working with me at some point, but
Yeah.
never did it before.
Awesome.
Never had the time.
I mean, that's so cool. And not only doing this, but also talking about it. Being in your position. Thumbs up.
Yeah, thanks.
Did anybody do anything on GitHub for the first time? Like make a pull request? Maybe you made a pull request before, but you never made an issue, or did anybody expand GitHub knowledge? Including if you had never used GitHub before, and now you have at least once.
Joanne is raising her hand, but now switch on your mic. Was it the first GitHub pull request? No, can't believe it.
Not my first pull request. I've not worked with issues before, and I've not kind of had that project manager role as Octopus was kind enough to call it. To it's one thing to have my own repository, but to kind of offer others to use it. Even we didn't go far down that road, but I did get the experience of considering what does that even mean, and what will I have to do, and do I need to make different copies for different things. And there were a lot of considerations that I got to do to make that I haven't before. That was cool.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Joanne. Anything else? Anything else first time?
Yeah, so it was actually my first pull request that I did with another person. I think most of my GitHub repositories I've worked solo. So this is like the first one that I've like worked with someone and did my first pull request, and that was really exciting.
Cool.
Hey, I want to add something here because I think it's seriously important. Now, I mean, just beyond code and mathematics here, I think this was an invite to explore voting systems in general. It's an incredibly important part of our lives. As it's a civil duty to vote, and we generally neglect and don't really understand the technicalities and the dynamics behind it. So it is very important in the future that we're looking at, where decentralized autonomous organizations, or as Sherman put it, internet tribes taking a bigger and bigger space in our lives in the future. I think this is going to be knowing this in particularly at a mid-level depth is very helpful and important. And for me, it was the first time that I actually deep dived into the subject. So what was more enjoyable was researching this and seeing them turning into mechanisms in code. Yeah, thanks. That part was the first as well. The big first.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. I must say, I remember, I think this was late last week or so, when Octopus told me, you know what, we had such amazing voting designs, but then ultimately we had to choose rank and slide, and he was a little bit disappointed. And now we are in the fine-tuning of weights and realize, oh man, the design space is still so huge that we struggle to narrow down and come up with the right metrics to decide if this is the best weights setting. So what I want to say here is mechanism design is really to the very detail of it, and it can have a huge impact. And this is what makes it so exciting. And yeah, if this track sheds a little bit of light on what this entails, I'm super happy. Oh yeah, and Joanne, integration between VS Code and GitHub for the first time. Okay, good. Thanks for sharing. Anything else? Alex?
Yes. And I already knew, but it was so interesting to really go out all the different ways you can tweak the data and what impact they have, and also to observe the actions. over to Jade at this point.
All right. Okay. So if we go to slide 3.
Wait. Okay. Yes.
Okay. In slide 3. So initially we start with the raw NFT data, taking into account who owns what. And then we go ahead and enrich it and categorize the NFT data with proof of knowledge, proof of expertise, proof of attendance, and proof of contribution. And then we go ahead and generate our voter data. So in this example, we have, for example, 3 different voters. Voter 1, you can see, has 3 proof of knowledge NFTs. Voter 2 has 2, and voter 3 has 2, and so on in this matrix. In slide 4, then we go ahead and read in the NFT weights that we define for each module. Proof of knowledge is typically like 7 across the board. Proof of expertise is slightly varying, but these are some examples. And then we go on to slide 5, and this is where we apply our amplifiers. So we wanted to make more of a difference in the types of NFT categories that you have. And so we go ahead and take in the weights from the previous slide and then apply the amplifiers that we tuned. And in this example, we have proof of knowledge. We amplify it to 8, proof of expertise to 10, and so on. We're still trying to find that kind of sweet spot for all of the different amplifiers for each category, but this will eventually inform the final weights of the voters. So then next we go into the synergies. So incorporating the synergies, we take the summation of the different synergies of NFTs. For example, if you have a combination of proof of knowledge and proof of expertise, that will give you a 0.1 addition, and so on. And then we take the final summation of those synergies and multiply it by the synergy strength. Sorry, yeah, that was the synergy strength that I was saying. So, okay, yes, now we can go on to the next slide. The last part that we do is we just smooth the score. So we ensure that not a single vote exceeds 0.55% of the total scores. If it does, then we go ahead and make a reduction based off of that 0.55%. And then we also ensure that the expert group's share of the total scores does not exceed, I believe we said 27.5%, but that I think we were tinkering around with. So yes, so that is now 27.5%. Okay, and then now we can get into the fun part, which is the data. So this is the weights of the voter data and the final results of the absolute base. So this is not including amplifiers, this is not including synergies, this is not including smoothing at all. And you can see, for example, the first group that we have has 149 voters at that 0.013 weight, and so on. With this, we see that candidate 4 wins in the end. If we go to the next slide, then we include the base with the smoothing. So this is, with the smoothing of the 0.055%. And this is where we start to see, a better categorization of the voter data and smoothing that out. The next portion is adding amplifiers with smoothing. So this is including the amplification of the different NFT categories that we apply to the voter data. And then I think the last slide that I'm going to go over with you guys is the synergy portion. So this is amplifiers with synergy with smoothing. So this is like all of the groups that we have defined, and you can see from the beginning of the base to here that we have more, we're bringing more of an equilibrium to those expert groups. So I don't know if we can show, yeah, like the base to this, that would be good. Yeah, like yes, exactly. So the base, you see it's kind of like the points are more so like together, and then compared to the last one that I was just on, the synergies, they're more spread out. And yes, okay, so I will hand it over to Felix to go over the rest with you guys.
Okay, thank you, Jade. It was very interesting to learn more about the methods we applied. And like you mentioned, I think like the main point is really how not only it gets more in equilibrium, but also like the outcome changes, right? So as you can here see for the outcome in the base, the non-experts, like the candidate for the non-experts is like very far away. And the more we apply of our like fine tunings, the more it gets closer until that's something where we kind of like made it too strong, the fine tuning, and we have to go back a little bit. And what we really wanted to achieve is that they are almost equal. And now we're coming to the last part of the presentation. So here you can see them next to each other again and follow how this is moving. And actually, so you can also see that just applying the amplifiers, it brings you better results than also applying the synergies. Maybe the synergies were chosen wrong, and maybe less is just more in this case. And we will definitely figure this out in the future. And the main problem we worked on, and we couldn't finish it in time, unfortunately, it was that to really achieve an equilibrium, we had to break up one voter group, right? It was exactly this voter group. It hasn't mattered like how we fine-tuned how we set the different parameters. This group always stayed the same. So, and the problem was when we said, for example, that the maximum threshold for the expert is 30% of all of the voters, right? You can see here the amount of voters that gets added to the expert group until it's full, and here the weight share they bring in respect to all of the voters. And the weight share rises exactly like the numbers. And here we have this huge drop because we have this group which is 75 to 80 people in every simulation, and it just increases from 20% to over 50%, right? And so we really have to figure out a way to set the parameters that this group is split up. And to figure this out, it brings us to the last slide where we visualize some patterns, right? About synergies, about categories. And that was also like kind of the starting point for our simulation, where you can see how the POKs, POEs, POCs, and POAs are distributed. Here you can see the different synergies, and like the voter group we wanted to break up, right, was exactly in this range. So we played around a little bit with the synergies that impacted the voters in this range the most. But as mentioned, we're still not there. And I think if we figure out the right settings, we will definitely share this in the Discord.
100%, please do so. Anyone, any questions?
I think there was a question from Joanne before.
Joanne, please switch on your mic.
No.
Ah, okay. So someone
anybody
raised
else?
the hand. I don't know.
Yeah.
I had a question at some point, but I forgot now. I think it was exactly how you came to define who is a voter in the proof of knowledge, or who has knowledge, who is expert, stuff. How you came up with that one?
Yeah, so I used the query provided by Angela in the Discord chat, and I copied just the response message and saved it as a JSON file, and then I just deserialized the data and transformed it to the same input I had before, and this allowed me to get the insights and the patterns and the behaviors. And what I did, maybe to come back to the main point of the question, how we figured out like the first settings for this. It was just playing around a little bit with the curve. I wanted to automate the task, but actually most of the work was done last night, so there wasn't that much time to automate things anymore. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions?
So are you only adjusting weights within the Rankin slide where you're weighting each NFT and then each voter? Or are you doing like group weighting adjustments after that's processed? Like similar to basically group hug, just with maybe different transfer mechanisms or something.
I think it's somehow similar to group hub in a way that we're also using clustering, and we haven't adjusted like the weight for the NFTs at all. And I think the main point was to we really focused on bringing the voting power between the experts and the non-experts in equilibrium, and the weights were already set pretty well, right? So we also, before you provided the new data with the weights, we also played around with this and observed how the curve behaves. And the curve that was our base, right, weights you provided, was exactly the curve we desired. So it was like already a very good setting in the start. And so then we thought, okay, instead of like doing more on the weights, we're trying to do something else that maybe is useful and can be combined. So we observed the data, and it's I mean, we're still not there, right? We still haven't brought it in equilibrium, but yeah, that was like the main point. And I don't think it has any impact on the mechanism itself. It's just it's just an additional logical part that can be applied without any interaction of the voters.
Mm-hmm. And
okay,
Octopus, are you frozen? No. Okay.
No, I did see Janen's hand up that time, so I wanted to make space for that.
Cool. Good.
Unless I'm hallucinating.
Joanne?
Yeah, well, I now Felix just said that he finds it doesn't really affect the mechanism as such, and that might be true. I can't really. It's not completely transparent to me what's going on here, but I was wondering about, you know, the introduction of group considerations after we explicitly chose this mechanism, because it was more transparent and more easy to reason about, I think, than group hug. So I'm just wondering if we are kind of introducing complexities here in a less explicit way, and more sort of behind the scenes, but introducing the kind of complexity that we chose not to have.
Yes, I see. I definitely see your point, and
just wondering.
Yeah, so I definitely see your point, and what we really try to do, I think maybe this it had not like come through in the presentation. So I think like the most impact really has the smoothing, and it really surprised me myself, right? And it really makes sense to apply the smoothing without adding a huge load of additional complexity, right? And just the smoothing was a very big step in the direction we want to make. And what we are doing, you're definitely right. It's way more complex, and maybe I'm wrong when I'm saying that it doesn't has impact on the mechanism. But what I really meant with this is with all the like complex amplifications and synergies and categories we're using, we just want to move the numbers in a way that's a little bit more equal, right, without changing the outcome at all. That's what I mean with not changing the mechanism. So what we are doing in the fine-tuning should never change the outcome, but should bring a little bit more equality.
I mean, if it shouldn't affect the outcome, then why do it at all? But anyway, I'm just, as you all know, I like group hoc a lot. What I did like also about group hoc was the explicitity. and yeah, I feel that there's some explicitity, I don't know the word, that is maybe lost here because the decisions are not made up front on a principle basis, but rather kind of, yeah, I don't know. It's hard to.
Yeah, no. I see what if I understood it right. You just meant that what we have done right here is very similar, but the main difference is that how you set the parameters in group hoc was really based on like logical conclusions from a person, you know, about the space and about the participants. And what we have done was more like kind of data driven and just looking at the curve. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, and somehow just to me a bit untransparent. Like why are you don't want to affect the outcome, but you do this to affect the outcome because you want something to be more equal, but it's not really a design choice that it should be equal. Something that's introduced in the last stage as fine-tuning. It's just a bit confusing to me.
Yeah, actually, I think I am not the best explainer, and so it's really good that you are like bringing this up. So I think it's not about not changing the outcome at all, but if you look at all the ranges of outcomes, right, we have this specific edge cases where it should prevent some outcomes to happen, or maybe shift a little bit in the direction of some outcomes, but just in edge cases, you know, like in the main part, it shouldn't be like that different. That's what I meant with fine tuning, right? It shouldn't change the mechanism, but it should help in some edge cases to be a little bit more fair. That's what we want to do.
We have Saremba. They raised their hand as well, and then we have two more presentations. Let's keep an eye on the time.
Okay.
Saremba.
I'll try to be very quick. This question is actually because I'm maybe I'm not listening with my absolutely full attention, so I possibly missed that. Can you once again say how do you do the smoothing?
The smoothing, yeah. I just you know, the smoothing, I was just looking at the curve, at the base curve. Wait, I have to bring it up again, right? And here, this was the base curve, and it really hadn't mattered like how you like fine-tuned the different parameters, and we had so much like different screws to tweak, but it had not equalized the voting power between the experts and the non-experts. And the reason for that was that we just had these small group with very, very high weights that were far apart of the others. And so we just like made the cap at the point. I mean, it was just like a try and learn, you know.
So what functions or what sort of procedures do you use to smooth?
Also, I just set the cap and said everyone that has weight above this will be reduced to this threshold.
I see. So is it that the idea is that you would like to make sure that the algorithm does not cause too big jumps? I unfortunately forgot the word for that, but I suppose if you think about a function of some parameters, you might think that having that function smooth is a desirable property. Smooth in the sense that if you have a small change in parameters, you don't have a huge jump in result. So is this the idea that you would like to make sure that you?
So
okay.
So.
But maybe this property is just that like this is maybe a side effect, but it's not maybe a side effect that needs to be removed because that just removes the voting mechanism, and that sort of alters the result of the voting mechanism.
So the main point about the smoothing was really that we just had this one goal in mind, right? Equalizing the voting power for the experts and the non-experts. And because some of the experts had so much weight, it just wasn't possible without the cap. I mean, if someone else figures out how this works without the cap, would be great. But for me, it just wasn't possible. I tried so much, and then I just thought, okay, maybe it works if I kept it, like the maximum amount, and then it worked and it went into the right direction, and was just like trial and learn process.
Would you not then maybe formulate it in the sense that you don't want any voting sort of person entity have huge power? So like you don't want to have whales, and then you don't call it smoothing, you might call it like a sort of a feature of the mechanism that you don't want anyone like suddenly have way bigger voting power.
Yes, so what you mentioned is, in my opinion, also a very desirable property for a mechanism, and it definitely makes sense to do the capping in both ways. And I think how you label it in the end is, yeah.
I what I'm thinking is that when you sort of call it a feature of the mechanism rather than sort of a small property of the algorithm, then you add back the transparency, and then you might sort of say that this might actually even be in line with some of the requirements.
Yeah, you have a point here, right?
Okay, thank you.
Angela, you're muted.
Thanks for the pointer. I just wanted to say these are super important questions. I think I would have more. Let's move this to the Discord conversation. I found it really helpful to get your comments over the days, and I'm sure your comments are valuable, Felix and Jade, to further, let's say, sharpen maybe what's the goal here and what can we achieve via the methods you applied. And I think this will help you tremendously in finalizing your idea. Thanks for presenting.
Thanks.
And we have, I think, Aaron, you wanted to present as well.
Yes, but
are you ready?
No, because what I'm looking at is actually playing around with numbers and see what other issues. I mean, I've drifted into another direction, to be honest with you currently. A few things I wanted to point out just, and then I'll rest my case. Is that the way it stands right now is that the default adjuster needed in order to amplify the proof of expertise to a level of proof of knowledge with the weights included, it is around 21, right, as a factor.
Aaron, briefly, we are now talking again about Felix and Jade's.
No, I'm just looking at the current values, what we have, the number of NFTs, and then the cohorts divided into the default schematic that you provided. So we have, when you consider the number of people who have signed up and completed the POK group with the POE group, that's what I'm trying to say. If we want to equalize it, then the adjuster should be around 21.
Yeah,
and that pushes us to sincerely think about what the level of participation, realistic level of participation, is going to be, because for the POK to be overwhelming, it is less likely, to be honest with you. So if we don't consider this in a realistic manner, which will require your expertise and your experience, and then the simulation will be misleading. Because the people who, if we assign currently, if we have no further NFTs right now, then the value of the NFT or uniform value of the NFT for proof of expertise should be 300 and something, and that's I'm pretty sure that people who have contributed and invested into this, being the experts, they're going to vote, and people who have joined proof of knowledge and acquired that last year, they might not have an idea about this. Just they might or they might not. It all depends on the community. So I think when we're running these simulations from today to tomorrow, when I'm done as well, it's important to factor in different type of attendance simulations, more or less.
Absolutely, Aaron. And we get to this. I mean, I prepared some numbers that we produced about this question of balancing as well. And I agree. And but let's postpone this because I think this is referring to what I brought up, this making the certificate weight equal between the different groups. And the numbers you just said, this times 21 scaling, correct?
Yeah. I'm going to ask Octopus's help in the next 24 hours too, because I need to record the outcome that I have on the Excel sheet without resorting to code. Because when I change the parameters, then my simulation is giving me random numbers, as you know. So the voter identities change. So I need a way to record the results and then compare them in order to give the group something solid. That's why I rest my case for now.
Okay, good. But maybe what we share later will be helpful, and otherwise we continue this on Discord. Sounds good?
Yeah.
Okay, then I think it's Victor who also wanted to share and present.
Hi, can you hear me?
A moment ago, at least, we were able to hear you. Now, not anymore. Are you there still? Seems Victor dropped. Let's see if he is able to come back. Let's give him a moment.
He seems to be gone from the room.
Yeah. He just tried a moment ago. He tried to re-enter. Okay, yeah, there he is. Let's see if it works now. Victor, can you hear us? Please.
Hi, hello. Sorry,
yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, we can hear
Sorry,
you.
it's a little bit noisy and I just got kicked out. And on top of all of this, I'm not sure if I can share my screen right now, but can somebody maybe just click on the link that I shared in Discord? I can put it.
Okay, give me a second. Do you remember in which channel you shared it?
I can put it into the chat. I have it in.
Yeah, this would be perfect.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. Okay, I'll open it. Yeah, all right.
It's really just 2 slides.
Here we go.
Perfect. Thank you. So basically, what I tried to do is, I think I already posted before in the Discord, initially just, I think a picture where I just took the weights as described in the default documents that you shared, Angela. And so what you can see here is basically, I think you see you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns, and in the first row you just see a normal weight allocation, and you see in the I like to kind of present it like this as a column because it's very easy to see the differences. So you see 1, 1, 1 in the first column. That's basically my control. That's literally no weight. Then you have Angela's default, which I called like this. It's basically just all the code names on the x-axis, and then the weights that you gave to the code names. And then I asked ChatGPT twice, as you can see, 1 and 2, to kind of increase one time the weights for the already higher weights, and then equilibrate more in the second case the weights. And it kind of more or less did a good job. Or not. I think I was expecting a little bit more of a stark difference. I then created also a dictator weight allocation that I took out because it didn't really, I just wanted to have it as well as a control to kind of show a dictator, but it didn't really show this result. So just to keep it simple, I just introduced mine, like 1LB, 1 love. It's just literally giving, as you can see, shifting the weights a little bit towards what I discussed, just keeping it simple for the TE fundamentals. They all have basically, I think, a weight of 1, and then the tracks a weight of 3. And so even if you don't really like have all these numbers in your head, I think it's easy to appreciate that the differences are clearly to see in this column structure. So now, again, in the second row, you can see then the weights basically on the x-axis, and then you can see the number of addresses exactly. So how many people have what kind of, actually the x-axis should say power, because in the first column, obviously you have the weights. It's because it's all weighted to 1, so nothing. It's a control. But then for the other columns, you have the power. So you can see again just at the glance how the power distributions are different between those examples. And I thought it's quite interesting to see that my distribution looks actually very different to all the others. And you can clearly appreciate that Angela's default already, but also in the other ones, you see kind of more of a structure, which kind of derives from the fact that I think the default gives like 7, and obviously if you have then 2 fundamentals, you go to 14, 3 to 21. And so that's why you see this kind of, you see obviously that a lot of people did, 1 fundamental, and then less people did 2, and then less people did 3. And so that's why I kind of described this also as a retention factor. In a way, you can somehow see this tendency. And then the last row, this whole slide is just to kind of have a quick way to see all these parameters and just appreciate them and see certain kind of key information pieces to then look at the simulation to not have all of this on one slide. And so if I go through the last row, and the last row, you have the control again is logical because you basically have 1 for all of them. So you just have a dotted line. But then actually for all the other columns, like I did that originally with the intention to see if there are, you see on the x-axis, I think weight, and on the y-axis, you see weight divided through the number of NFTs that you have. And I just wanted to know, because if you see something that is in the lower right quadrant, it would somehow mean that you have a lot of weight, but you don't really have that many NFTs. So I just wanted to see if, depending on which kind of weight allocation you have, like if it's Angela's default, GVD 1, 2, or mine, if you can see somehow more people in that quadrant, like where you would say, oh, you know, I got like a weight, like a voting power of maybe 50 or 70, but I just have like 1 or 2 NFTs. And obviously that's good information, because you might want to avoid this. You might want to actually have people eventually that have quite a lot of NFTs, or maybe even have a population where you have people that have quite a lot of NFTs, and therefore they have quite a lot of weight, and not just I have 1 NFT and it gave me all the power. And unfortunately, for like in that row, my example is like I should have kind of increased the resolution, because you can, what you see for Angela's example very nicely, that you see this kind of distribution again, basically almost in lines. For me, since my weight allocation is just 1, you cannot see this really, because they just kind of, you would have to kind of increase the resolution. You might see something similar. But so basically, this is just the parameter slide. These are the 5, so the 4 parameters with the control. And then if you go 2 slides down, so these are, then I use the Rankin slide model just to run, I think, 10,000 runs, so 10,000 simulation votes. And the first row we already know, so that's just to kind of remember what kind of parameter set we're looking at. And then the second and the third row are the results. And what I tried to do here, and that was somehow kind of sparked by a discussion in the Discord as well, that was kind of, I think, looking at the participation rate. Or maybe you also discussed this in your video that you shared with Octopus, Angela. And you were kind of like, I was kind of also wondering, like, what if, because it's very unlikely, I mean, hopefully, but it's very unlikely that we have like 100% participation rate. And maybe it's, so I went, I don't know, I took number X, in that case, 35%, sorry. And then I just wanted to ask myself the question, like, if there's actually a change, like if I just randomly take a sample of 35% of the same simulation that I've done with 100%, if I can actually see that the result changed, which does change, and somehow interestingly, it always tends towards C, but I don't know exactly why. But you already see that in the first row, you always have, not always, but you have some different winners. Like I think mine is D, and then you have C for GPT-1, and so basically, this in general, I think is a tool that allows you to kind of see what I haven't introduced before, how these lines that I've mentioned before in the Discord that you can see in the first row, which indicate the mean, the median, like I think a half line and some other, it's literally just indicators where you could maybe use them and use the distance, for example, from the mean to the half line to say, oh, okay, like this gives me information about how well distributed the voting power actually is. And I was wondering if I could somehow develop this into something where I can use this very simple indicators to somehow optimize for them and say, okay, you know, maybe it's too complex to go through every single possible combination, but you can somehow find some combinations that work based on defining a distance that you would like to have. And so, yeah, that was kind of my idea that I just wanted to quickly present. I hope it makes sense.
Thank you, Victor, for your presentation. We have a range of questions here in the chat. And also, I think, Jonas, you raised your hand for a while now.
Yeah, I posted my question also on the channel. I was just wondering, you said that you have 10,000 runs that you did. I'm just curious what was actually different in the runs, or what's the point of doing that?
So I basically initially created 10,000 simulated votes in terms of just created 10,000 different CSV files with randomly distributed votes, and I just wanted to see if then actually I've done more than this. I've not only exposed them to the same randomness, but then also kind of just introduced randomness in every single iteration, which doesn't make sense actually, because then you will always get different results. But I just wanted to be sure that I actually see that, like again, like a control, because I don't know, I'm not a professional coder, and it could be that, you know, I just have to kind of be sure that what I see is actually true.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
So basically, yeah, you just want to see that there's nothing by any chance that you see some certain pattern that C is suddenly winning all the time or so because of some weird thing that you introduced or so.
Yeah, I can give you a
so what
example.
you would expect is always a relatively uniform outcome of all the winners, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like if you run it 10 times, you might not see the same things as if you have somehow, I don't know, 10 or ideally like 100,000 or more, just randomly generated examples. It's just a sampling thing. And for the coding part, I don't know, I don't really trust too much what I do sometimes, and so I just want to be sure that I, for example, was struggling with a very minor mistake that then took me like an hour to realize that I just calculated the columns in the wrong way, and so then you see always the same results, and that cannot be. And so I just try to kind of figure out how I can correct like the sampling, but then also find a way to easily see if the coding is okay.
Okay. I hope that's a sufficient answer, Jonas. And who else has a question on Victor's experiments? I have a question regarding the voting mechanism you've used. So did you go with running the voting simulations? Did you take a single winner plurality, or what did you apply rank and slide?
Sorry, that was on slide 2 actually that we jumped. It was the rank and slide mechanism.
I see. Okay.
Yeah,
I see.
I used that because we basically agreed on the fact that we're going to use that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. And then again, the whole thing is more like a tool. It's not like the results are supposed to be like somehow news and astonishing. But it's nice because literally anything like now, for example, a lot of people will have minted. I know I did minted new NFTs, and so the landscape will have changed. And maybe also the weighting has changed because I know that you've been working on it. So I'm already looking forward to just drop it into the script and then just have a look, you know, how this changes in comparison to what we produced.
And I wanted to check again, because here you are looking for a generalizable formula to define the distance between, for example, the median and halfway. So could you say this again? What you're trying to express here?
Yeah. So that is just kind of a very simple approach. I'm sure it can be made, it can be improved. But so I was just thinking, okay, so in a complete equal scenario, you should see that the half line, I think that's the green one, is in the middle of the maximum and the minimum. And then it should overlap also with the median and the average, because then it would be literally just completely equal. And so I was thinking, if whatever you change from there, if you give more weight to one group or to another group, then you will have a difference between the median. And I like to work with the median because it has a little bit of a more interesting property for particularly newcomers. That's why I thought that it gives an ability to look at it in a more dynamic way and see just, you know, for example, if you see the delta, like the difference between the halfway and the median, then you could say, okay, look, there's been a lot of newcomers coming in. So in comparison to what would be completely equal, it shifts to the left and the distance gets larger. And so that's something that I thought could be used, is one way to use as an indicator. There might be many there are many other ways, but there could be somehow if it can be used as something you can optimize towards, because you say my goal is to have this delta, because this in overall will give me something acceptable as weight distribution. Or you can go at it from the other side, and I'm looking forward to use your weight distribution, then have a look how it looks like, and then just try to kind of draw conclusions. And that was my idea there.
Okay, this could be our lens to measure against, so to say.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Once we define a certain particular distance that we are aiming for.
Exactly, and maybe you find different combinations or other indicators that will also dynamically change, and then you can then have several parameters where you say, okay, this is the fingerprint that I would like to have.
Yeah. Awesome. Anybody else having a question on that one? Okay, in case not, I suggest, Victor, definitely keep an eye on what we continue to produce as fine-tuned weights, and then let's measure it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this. Unfortunately, I will have to drop off, but I'll check into the Discord later.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Andrew, you seem to have made a pretty good comment about requirements. Would you like to repeat it? Maybe it's worth highlighting.
Yes, and I will make this again. I have a few minutes later to discuss the rest of the process, but I think it's important to recognize that it's easy to get caught in this feedback loop where you have requirements and then you use those to choose a design, but then the design has some undesirable properties, so you choose new requirements and then you're starting over. I think the most important thing would be clarity about values, and then the question is, how are we encoding that clarity into something algorithmically reproducible? And this is really hard, so maybe I'll come back to this, but what I said in the chat was you can think of the requirements like, so first of all, you have like the big picture idea. The student should know basic chemistry. Then you have the requirements, which are verifiable things that represent that idea, like a specific exam or a specific lab practicum. And then you have the student is kind of like the design. The student can show up and then they'll be prepared. And the parameters are like the final details of like, maybe the student sits at a particular desk or studied for a particular amount or ate something specific. But you get in, if you're not clear about the separation between requirements, design, and parameters, it's really easy to do things like accept the design and then try to change the requirements to meet the design, or to get in this situation where it's like, man, this car will not go in water, so let's take the wheels off. Well, then it's no longer a car. So just to be really clear about what we're optimizing for. And really, it's going to be difficult to do verification until we're clear on that.
Yeah. And believe me, Octopus is pushing me towards, I need clear metrics. I need clear, how can we measure if this is a good result? And I think part of why this is definitely a challenge is we are involved, no? So I am as TE Academy founder, and you are as community members. So whenever we look at some metrics, we don't only look at the numbers or the chart, we look at it, do I really like this? Do I really, shouldn't we aim for more equality? Or, all these questions that are sometimes confusing our clarity in working towards a certain goal. And that's not a bad thing. I just want to say it makes it harder. Yeah. Okay. So I would now share some more results, or let's say results, our line of thinking. It's less about these are the final fine-tuned weights because we are not there, but it's more like this is the direction we'd like to take and why we take it. Okay, so fine-tuning weights. Number one, so you all have or in many of the approaches you shared, we are looking at the current state of the ecosystem. So not generally what's the value or the weight of a certain NFT. We are also looking at what's the current status of the ecosystem, meaning how many NFTs are there, do exist, what's the supply of these NFTs per category, per NFT type, and then across the students to then get to an impression or a picture, what is the power distribution in our community. Now, there is one comment that is certainly something to think about. Currently passing modules 2, 3, and 4. So these are the TE fundamentals modules. 2 is requirements engineering, 3 is the design, and 4 is the verification. So passing these modules carries more total weight than writing these TE fundamentals modules. And is this ideal? And then I just want to repeat some of the conversation we had on Discord that is relevant. I don't read it out entirely, but I took a screenshot here for reference. So what about how to distribute weights, looking at, okay, those who have been in the live tracks, who have met the fellowship candidates versus those who not had the chance to attend the sessions. And should we differentiate here? Or can we take other approaches? Joanne's comments on what counts, and our recent conversation on, is it the session actually? Is it providing the lecture and how well this lecture was prepared? Or is it rather about the total research activity of a certain candidate or the experience as a practitioner? And my response, and I shared this to clarify, I think all these approaches are valuable and valid. It's just in our case, the fellowship is for awarding work that is relevant for the token engineering discipline to further develop the discipline. And second, that the most important, let's say, weights indicator is knowledge and experience, which is today pretty rare in our community. Nevertheless, even, and despite the fact that this might create an not very well balanced voting system, it reflects what we have today. We have a small group of people who are well experienced, who know this, who have been able and invested their time to create a TE fundamentals course, for example. And we have a huge community of beginners. This field is an early stage field. And this is why, for example, I said, okay, let's not make, you have been attending a study season of the fellowships, let's not make it a criteria, because, for example, the most active, sought after token engineers are very busy. And even if they would want to attend a lecture, they can't. And nevertheless, I trust them that they have a very good perspective on if this work of a certain fellowship candidate is relevant to token engineering because of their day-to-day experience, what matters in this field today. And also a second element here is that I'd like to integrate external signals beyond what we think is relevant at TE Academy internally. Like, students is one piece in the puzzle, but what's the experience and the perspective of people who are working on projects or of people who are working in research initiatives? This is the kind of external perspective that I'd like to integrate. However, then we have to see how's the distribution of these different groups in our ecosystem. And this brought me to take a look at, and I know that you all went in a very similar direction, take a look at the total certificate weight. So what's the weight that I assigned initially? So we know that certain NFTs represent different things. I took this default weights and then multiplied by the supply that we have. And the result is that if I look at students, so NFTs that are acquired by students versus NFTs that are awarded to giving a lecture, to speak at our events, then I have a ratio of 8,300 certificate weight for students and 336 for experts. So meaning, looking back at, I'd like to integrate all signals and knowledge and experience is leading, this is definitely not the right weight setting. So my own default weight setting would not be sufficient. Okay, then let's come up with the design goal again. Imagine, what if we balance the certificate weights to make it equal? I started with, based on what I said beforehand, that knowledge and experience leads to further develop our discipline. You could even say, then the expert should have more than 50%. But okay, let's make it equal. Let's say students have a total certificate weights that is equal to the expert's total certificate weights. How would we have to tweak the weights? And at the bottom of the slide, you can see how I identified students versus experts, and it's purely on the NFTs. It's not about combinations. It's not about people. It's purely based on the NFTs. And in our case, we can do this. Then here's the table of how we would have to scale. So the student weights stay as they are. So they are not changed. Remember the 7 for the TE fundamentals, 20 for TE fundamentals course authors, 1 for just attending the ECC TE track. These student weights don't change, but the expert NFTs, since we have so little, the number of experts is so small and the number of expert NFTs also, then we would have to scale or set the new weights to look at the right column. For certain token IDs, again, I'm manipulating the weights of the NFTs. We would have a huge scaling to land at equal total certificate weight. And then we land at a pro and con, of course. So number one, it's a great design. Why? We have a system that is super hard to Sybil attack, and it's not due to the numbers, rather because of the fact that expert token IDs, the types of NFTs for experts can't be self-minted, and this adds an additional Sybil resistance that is not by voting design, rather by the design of the NFT system. Still, it's super hard to attack. Also, the self-minted NFT have, compared to the expert NFTs, a low weight. And at the same time, and this is quite typical, it has a terrible Nakamoto coefficient because, of course, with the expert, with the high weights values for expert NFTs, we have dictators, no doubt. And the pro is, I like this design because it says, okay, if all students take part, this is the fundamental design principle we apply here. If all students take part, experts can't dictate, no? So they have a 50%. And it brings down the decision again to participation. And that's what I like about it. So what will be decisive is participation. And then on the other hand, a con argument for this design is it might not be ideal in reality because some of the self-minted NFTs will never have the chance to impact the election, and then it might be better to say upfront that those have zero weights value. And in fact, in reality, this design, and here we get back to the stage of the ecosystem, it's very hard to swing by the experts, super hard to change by the students. Another element that is not listed here that I also think is valuable is the clarity and the transparency in the design. Because if we set up groups like that, we can easily, retrospectively say, obviously the students had a different opinion than the experts. And still the experts made this decision change. Or they are very well aligned. And at the current state of the ecosystem where we, for example, for Group Hub, we don't have these other, let's say, where we have this awareness that a certain member of the community belongs to a certain group. This is definitely, so this expert versus students is something that everybody is aware of, and that is also easy to understand, being a teacher versus being a student. All right, so we know, okay, this first approach with making the certificate weight of students equal to the experts is too extreme. Can we find an alternative version and define the group of active students as a third group? And I defined it at the moment also based now on accumulated weight in the wallet as a certain number, as opposed to some particular NFTs, because in fact you can land at being active, taking many different routes. And this is what we now will explore further and test for robustness. So again, Sybil resistance, Nakamoto coefficient, and check the edge scenarios on participation. Because I agree to everything you said earlier, participation in this design and in many others plays an important role. And here we should have a good understanding of when this breaks and when breaking, meaning changing the weight is changing the vote is acceptable or not. All right, I stop here because Octopus wanted to add more comments on the process.
Yeah, I wanted to add things both from various literature on engineering best practice and then what I've lived through, both positively and negatively, in terms of different projects and how they've gone. And I'm not, I think what we're doing right now is extremely normal. It's never the case that you just say, here are the requirements. Now we're going to test. Okay, now we've met all the requirements. Typically what happens is, as you see things, you see new things. And so what has happened in this case, and it happens all the time, is in actually getting to a concrete stage of seeing how something works, we may realize that an important requirement to us was missed. I think there are two things that are important. The first is that we realize when we add a new requirement, we're making a trade-off. So if we realize this new requirement is important, what previous requirement are we willing to give up on or to move down the list? Because we probably cannot satisfy them all. And the second is, how will we verify that these requirements are met in a way where, if, God forbid, we have to do a post-mortem and say, how in the world did this result happen? We look back and say, well, this result is what we should have expected or could have expected. Now, I'm editorializing. I'm speaking for myself and not for TE Academy. But I think that as we're at this stage, it's important to realize, A, it's normal, but B, the tendency is for scope creep. And we have to realize that some of the things we want are still going to be in conflict, and the important thing is to clarify. And there are lots of tools we can use. We can thought experiment, we can simulate, we can discuss. All of those are valid ways. None of those is better than the other. Could we move on one slide?
Yeah.
So these, I've already basically said this, but just to reiterate that there is no free lunch. For instance, two of the requirements that we captured initially are in clear conflict, in my opinion. One of them is that every vote should count, which is, a great idea. The other one is that expertise should matter. And if we weight the expertise sufficiently so that, next slide, I think. Yeah, here we go. So we have this idea all votes should have influence. And then we have the other idea that expertise should count. Well, if expertise counts sufficiently, then there will probably be some scenarios where we will look back and say, wow, that person's vote did not matter. If they had not showed up, it wouldn't have changed the result. And that's just how it is. And then we say, okay, we accept that. We accept that maybe in 25% of situations that this will happen, and we're willing to make that trade-off. And if someone comes back later and says, hey, my vote didn't count, we can say, yes, we knew this was a possibility. Here's the exact scenario. When we run it through the simulations, we see that this happened, and we knew that could happen, and we made the trade-off that you didn't have sufficient knowledge, or your NFT level, or however the narrative is. So this all votes should have influence, which is like a great, democratic ideal. Somehow we have to translate that into something concrete, which is testable and verifiable. And it's extremely difficult. I'm not saying that this is, first of all, it's difficult, like emotionally, to realize, hey, this is a scenario where we get an outcome that's really not great, that this person's vote didn't count, essentially. But that's hard to recognize, hey, this won't be perfect. And then there's also a technical challenge of saying, okay, how would I recognize if every vote actually had influence? So can I get to a place where I'm saying something like, I hope light blue will work. If it doesn't, please feel free to tell me. But is it something like where you're saying every voter should have at least one election where their vote did make the difference, but it shouldn't, be the majority of the time? Is that sufficient to say all votes have influence? Another thing that's really weird is if we did something like, there are mechanisms that are used where you vote for me, and that fact that you voted for me actually makes me lose. You would have been better off not voting. It's not just that your vote was irrelevant. Your vote was actively destructive to the outcome you wanted. And we can say that should never happen. Maybe that's a very legitimate requirement that we could be easily verified. And then you could get to like more democratic. I would, by the way, not recommend this one personally. But you could say something like, at least any voter should have at least 5% of elections where they vote for the winning candidate. Well, that's a requirement that you could have, right? I'm not saying that's the right requirement. Probably these two are reasonable. But it's not about what is the right specific requirement. It is about that we understand really how specific the requirements need to be to say, yes, we checked that box. Yes, we checked that box. So that we feel confident, not only in it's important to feel confident in like a philosophical sense, that we have like the directionally right thing. And then there's the technical requirements of, 80% of the time we get the right winner as we have defined it. So if we could go on. And the final thing I would say is there are different ways, there are different competing and equally valid ways of verifying these things. Each of these verification procedures has its own trade-off. So if we looked at this requirement, for any voter, there is at least one situation where they cast the winning vote. then we could do this via group hug. For instance, in group hug with certain weight settings, you can prove that this will not be met. If someone is not an expert, if the weights are set in a certain way, then there's never going to be a chance that their vote is the deciding one. Actually, I'm going to recant that, because to say something that definite requires a lot more thought. So let me make that be a question. But the point is, you can reason through things and arrive at conclusions, which is totally valid. Mathematical proof, thought experiment, however it's presented or framed. And then you can do like a large scale, lots of calculations and computations of specific instances through simulation or some type of search. And this is basically how you're providing the evidence that the requirement is met. So we actually have, several layers of translation between our high level idea, our specific requirement, our process for verifying that requirement. And then if we go through simulation, we have even more that we have to design specific simulations to give evidence in that direction. And so that's just to be clear about what the process is moving forward. And I'll take 30 more seconds if we could move forward and keep going, if you would. Yeah, so that's kind of the process we're looking for here, is to look at, okay, if we're looking at this mechanism, what is reasonable Sybil resistance? And we should decide that, I feel, have a range ahead of time, and then we can verify that it's met. And then we're going to the place where if we want to verify computationally, we need very specific things to test. And if we choose not to, that's fine too. But I think that's a different decision process. And again, we should be clear, we're doing it this way and not this way, and here's why. Does that make sense to y'all?
Thumbs up. I'm nodding because Octopus told me beforehand, but I just want to hear, does this make sense? Yeah, so obviously there is, token engineering is a back and forth, and force yourself to be clear, not get around decisions. It's a lot of decision making actually, and being aware of assumptions. And yeah, if this was something you have learned here, that's great. Here's more about the process. Octopus, would you like to add?
Yes, I would just think that probably to reach a final decision where we say the relevant decision makers approved this, that we want to get to our specific final requirements and then translate those into, I will test this property this way, which can be lots of different ways. It could be LV looks at these graphs and they look right to him. Visual inspection is an acceptable verification procedure in engineering. Or it could be, this code runs this way or whatever. But whatever they are, then we follow that process and we verify this met the requirements. And then this is the design, or it gets overruled. But just to be clear about how we're actually making the decision.
And I just want to add here, we'll definitely set up requirements for the tests, and I definitely want to publish it. It's just a matter of will we publish beforehand or after, but to be discussed. Hello group, make it a reality. But then we have time until end of this week, right? To come up with specific requirements that you want to verify the design against. And if we can in any way integrate it, if this makes sense, we'll make it happen to verify before we implement the voting, right? This is the plan, Octopus.
Yes, I'm very happy to share the load of simulation work of running simulations, but I would want to start running simulations Monday morning. So if things can be in place by that.
Yeah, I just want to have yeah, we have to take a look at the requirements, because of course any requirement we have to fully understand it. We have to translate it in a verification scenario, but generally open to have your thoughts. Okay.
Are you at the moment already aware of some requirements that really can't be met, or like some conflicting ones? I mean,
yeah,
Octopus,
for example, I can immediately tell all weights should be equal. Or as you said, for example, the idea of the scarcer the NFTs are, the larger the weight is, because this would not be in line with the actual purpose or the idea of the voting. It would conflict.
Yes, so there are definitely some ideas that we wouldn't want to have, because those ones they make the voting not good, or would conflict with some things.
Right.
But like, are there, like, when we talk about requirements right now, are we talking about the initial requirements that we had in the spreadsheet, or are we talking about something different?
We are not talking about the super general, or maybe Octopus, you should specify, because this is your slide.
Yeah, I'm thinking, for instance, the idea that experts, well, already we've said the idea that every vote should matter is in conflict with the idea that expertise should matter more. Right.
And so about that, I was like, well, it can be in conflict in some certain situations, but as long as the parameters are not wrong, it's not, or it might not, right?
Well, so that would be the goal, is to say,
yeah, okay.
That would be the goal, maybe, to say, and again, the more concrete we can make it, because when I say expert weight matters, it's very vague. If you can say, like 90, this is not the right thing. Okay, take this idea and expand it, or generalize it, or refine it. But something like 90% of the time, if the experts are unanimous, the candidate that the experts select should win. That's a requirement that we can test. And then we could test it over full turnout, half turnout, different scenarios. But if we do I'd say if we do 30 very different scenarios, probably 3 to 5 of them will have results where we're just like, and there's just no way around that. We have to decide, do we want to guarantee this one very specific thing? Do we want to look around at a different range of scenarios? And as we start to do the testing, I think you'll see it more. But this is part of the conversation, is this process of actually translating things, because it helps us realize, oh, maybe this is more important to me than I thought, or this actually was really important and we didn't identify it beforehand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, all good. So I guess, yeah, now we just have to continue a little bit to verify which of these kind of things are conflicting, or which ones are not, and then come up with specifics.
Jonas, you have been always good in testing our ideas, so keep on doing this. Okay, let me just see. Okay. Oh yeah, one more comment. This is totally unrelated. I'm just now looking at first the final announcements that I should not forget. First of all, the voting period. So voting opens on Tuesday, 25th. So this is our absolute deadline, but of course we should have some buffer. We have to test the implementation. If now, after all this works, then the implemented voting system does really produce the outcomes as planned and as expected. So minimum 1 week for testing. So there's 1 week left until we share the final design and algorithm with Vitor. And then it closes on Tuesday, July 9th. We decided that we won't share the preliminary temporary voting results with the students, right? So we'll hide it. So we'll all know who wins on July 9th only. And there's this thread. Let's make it a reality. Let's make it happen. I'll share more about what's still needed. We should collect a to-do list. And as Octopus said, support in simulations is welcome. Support in putting together information for voters is welcome. Testing the UI. So there's plenty to do still, and it'll be exciting to then produce the final voting. And last but not least, I would like to invite you all to give our hosts at the Optimism community some love. So here we tried, and I'm a bit delayed, but we tried to share our results with the Optimism Collective. Since this is all happening on Optimism, retro funding is a big topic for them. Reputation could play a role. We are running this experiment to not only do this for ourselves, rather to educate the total crypto community on finding good routes for decision-making in decentralized economies. And that's why here's the link. If you are at the Optimism Collective, give it a feedback or give it a like, or support me in posting the updates. All right, I think that's it. I close with a big thank you. It was a super exciting journey. I think we won't end here today, but I must say that I'm very happy with this group, and that I just enjoyed very much that none of you ever took it lightly, and I'm totally confident that we'll come up with a voting design that is so much better than what we would have done if it wasn't a study group and not with this great team of contributors. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Matti.
Thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Aaron, let's meet on the Discord on the UI front. It's mostly testing. Okay, good.
Thanks.
See you all on Discord, and expect info via email regarding your NFT. And congratulations again to those who earned it. Well deserved. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The recording has stopped.